we won't go into anything else, but Sam, and we appreciate your patronage, Sam, here at K. Burnett. He asks, in parts of the Old Testament, it appears that God orders Israel to completely wipe out certain nations. In some places, in Exodus 23:30, the language is pretty vague, using terms like drive out. But then other places, Deuteronomy 3 and 20, the language is more explicit that the command is completely wiping out all men, women, and children. And there are other places where these commands are repeated. This understandably tends to be a real distasteful thought to many modern readers, whether they're believers or not. What's your assessment of this judgment and even other catastrophic judgments like Sodom and the flood that involve wiping out those we would call innocent along with the guilty? For example, if a modern-day army killed children along with the adults, they would be universally criticized unless they're Hamas, and it would be seen as a war crime unless they're Hamas. And more practically, how would you reason with people about this who believe that God's command here is too harsh? He's violating the moral code he has established. And we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning, because the question, I think, on a biblical level is actually readily answered. What is difficult and almost impossible to get people to understand is the answer. Especially when, and you notice he said modern readers. This is the, well, our sensitivities are such that we can't go along with this kind of thing. And the biblical answer makes a lot of sense. I don't think it'll be accepted very much, but this has kind of got two parts to it. So the first part is, and Sam mentioned Sodom, and he mentioned the flood. Both of those show God at the end of either all civilization, or I should say most of civilization at one of them, and then all of particular areas. Now, what this gets to is that, and let's turn to Genesis 6. And we'll start in verse 1. Miss Davis, will you read 1 through 8?
Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were good, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not strive with man forever.
Let me stop a second. Now, Miss Davis has taken the liberty on our call-in program for your agricultural questions to change the word beautiful, if you noticed that. And it's because it's not the word beautiful. In the Hebrew, it's the word
Good.
Good. Okay, stop a second. To answer this question, you have to go back. I personally think before the time period where the creatures that we call Homo sapiens, mankind right now, even began. You have to read the Book of Enoch, at least the first part of it, to begin to understand this. And many things in the Bible, you need to read the first part of the Book of Enoch to understand it. I'm not saying it's canon. That's not it. I'm saying that there are parts of it that are quoted by books that are canon. And I'm amazed. I saw a theologian one time say, well, none of the books of the Apocrypha are quoted by other books in the Bible. And I was just stunned. I thought, where in the world did you not study at all, or is this just the company line? I realized, oh, it's the company line. Somebody told him, a professor said, da 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 da. And just like I remember, I had a professor, university history guy, and who stood up and told us that George Washington had multiple illegitimate children. And, you're kind of stunned by this. But it was many years later on that I found out that he was quoting a man, a historian, that had written a book. And in that, he put in his research that he had found that George Washington had illegitimate children. Now, what he failed to put in his research is that there was no evidence of it, that he made it up. But the historical academic, the history academics picked it up and went with it. It was complete. It was a fabrication. It wasn't truth, but one of their own had said it, so it must be true. So we see people that will pick up the company line. The Book of Enoch is quoted in Jude and 2 Peter, relied on heavily, I believe, by Paul, and that's because of the powers, the principalities, the rulers, which Paul brings up often, authorities, and he's not talking about people authorities, he's talking about angelic authorities. And the long and short of it is that we're about to read that these angels, and they were in rebellion against God, and in their rebellion they hated God, and they really hated mankind. Okay, and so what they wanted to do was, and we see, I think, pretty good evidence of this, to get a fallen world going. They did a pretty good job. And part of it was, Mrs. Davis is going to be reading here, that they went in and they had offspring by these women. They saw they were good. It's not beautiful. They don't care. Who cares? But they saw they were good, and they hated that. They don't like the goodness. And so they came to destroy that. And I wanted to simply point that out. And we don't have time at this. We're going to be referring to this a lot, but we don't have time to go into, okay, we're going to do the Nephilim teaching all over again. But the fact is that there is, if you want other books on it, oh, great. I just forgot the guy's name. Michael Heiser has written extensively on this. By the way, a lot of people have written extensively on this. And as I said, 2 Peter, Jude, other places, it mentions these things. It was simply accepted truth back during these times. Well, we have some of it documented right here. So, Ms. Davis, if you'll go ahead and pick up wherever you left off, 2 or 3.
And the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were good, and they took wives for themselves whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh, and nevertheless his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of the hearts, or the thoughts of his heart, were only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I'll blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
Okay. There's a lot there, but what we see is all of mankind, with the exception of Noah, doesn't say the rest of his family, but with the exception of Noah. And here's the way that it's put. Where is it at? Verse 5. The wickedness of man was great on the earth, and here's where I think is where the drawing of the line gets. Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Only evil. I think every one of us in here at different times, because you being human, you wind up struggling with evil. And it often is a struggle that we don't recognize it as evil. You suddenly have a thought about someone that is on your I don't like them list, and you begin to think, well, I should have said this. Boy, if I have the opportunity, those kind of, and we don't recognize something about that. That those thoughts are coming to you. They're coming into you, and unfortunately, that your flesh agrees with them. But the fact is that they are evil. The evilness of, boy, and you, if I had this to say, well, guess what? You may not have that chance to say that about them or to them. So what you do instead is say it about them or about somebody else, because the anger in it, and we don't recognize it as from the evil one. Now, those struggles, things like that, I'm just trying to come up with something that maybe you struggle with about talking about somebody, be angry with somebody, or we could go with, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, lust, whatever it may be. And those struggles, and when you finally get past it, or you look back at it later on, you're going, oh, or you feel it again, and you finally begin to realize this doesn't feel that good. I don't like that. And the Lord's got to get you to that point, and you begin to realize that, hey, maybe that's evil. Maybe it is. Yeah, it is. It's evil. Now, I want you to think about what I'm about to say. What if all night long and then all day long it was thoughts like that you dealt with 24/7? In your dreams, when you're trying to go to sleep, if that doesn't tell you how evil those thoughts are, you know how you stay awake and you roll it around in your head, and then you get up in the morning, it's the first thing in your mind, and it's evil. It's of the evil one. And he's got ground in your life, but what if it's 24/7, every day, all the time? Folks, you're in hell. I mean, that's those kind of, I don't care even if you're evil, those kind of thoughts are tormenting. And you're thinking about people, and you're angry, and you're, all of this vindictive, all of these things, it's torment. Now, the evil that we see later on, if we were to go to Sodom and Gomorrah, these people at that place, they were so evil, so full of wickedness in their thought life, that as far as they were concerned, this Lot fellow is visited by, there are two men that wandered into the square, and Lot comes out and he says, it's really not safe out here. Didn't know he was talking to angels. Y'all come on in and get out of there. But the people are so evil that they see these two guys and they're going, well, let's go and have sexual relations with him. And so at least they knocked on his door. That was nice instead of just barging on in. But they tried to do the barging on in a little bit later on. I mean, this is pretty weird thoughts. You know, your neighbor has somebody visit and you happen to see it. And the first thing you think about is, let's have a riot outside their home so we can go and do something even more evil. Whoa. There was a reason that God had sent his angels to put an end to this thing. Their thoughts were continually on evil. Now, again, we don't have time, and we're not about to get started on the iniquity teaching, because, and I want to bring that up, as the Lord says in his law, I'll visit the iniquities of the fathers onto the children, to the third and fourth generations of all those who hate me. Now, hating is the opposite of shemaring there, of keeping his commandments. And in other words, that I don't think about his commandments. If you don't think about his commandments, you don't have, in other words, you don't have morals in your life at all. If they're not there, your thoughts are continually on evil. Okay? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Are y'all out there? You know, are you out there in radio land? The people of Sodom, the people of the earth, and it's difficult, and I'm going to explain in a minute what I mean by this. It's difficult for us to even understand and to believe and to imagine someone that had only evil in their thoughts all the time. But the reason that it's that way, there's a couple of reasons. One is that we don't believe that there's that kind of evil in the earth, when there is. That's the first thing. It's difficult for us to imagine it, but one of the reasons it's difficult for us to imagine is something that I'm about to explain, so you will hear. Sam mentioned that, well, we would look at this and go, that is against our modern sensibilities. Okay? But I've got a question. What happened to the people that of Sodom? What happened to the people of Sodom? They what? They all died. Okay. What happened to you 2,000 years ago? Okay. What happened to everybody 2,000 years ago? See, we all died. Now, I don't believe in dispensationalism, and it's not that God treats us differently. It's that we've been treated differently by God and given something. You're dead. The people of Sodom were dead. I personally think. Hold what you have right there and turn over to 3 Timothy. This is quite a long jump there. But 3 Timothy, a lot of people foolishly call it Titus. I don't know why. Titus, please. Titus, a verse we haven't read a lot, but chapter 2, verse 11. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to what? All men. Something has changed. All men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age. There's other places in Scripture that it talks about that the all men thing, and that the grace of God has appeared, and it's folks, it's for all of us. And something has changed. Something changed when he was nailed to the cross. It became very difficult. In fact, if we look, well, I can't. We don't have time to get into that. I'd love to, but in what the people like to bring up and say, well, this is the millennium, okay? And the millennium is the 1,000 years of God's reign. I personally, this is just me, because I think the 1,000 years is not necessarily literal. It may be. I'm not going to argue with you. You don't want to get mad and go, yes, sure it is. Well, you know, I have looked for 50 years and haven't found that proof. But we could say it's 1,000 years. I personally just think it means a lot, which is the way that the ancients would have used it, I think. And that 1,000 years, one of the things that we see that happens during that millennium time period, whatever is that it says Satan was no longer able to deceive. But remember, the people groups. See, that's the difference there. We see Sodom, people group, Gomorrah, people group. It says there were other cities in that area that were the same. People groups. We see when it gets down to Noah, it's all of mankind. Nephilim, people groups. Well, Nephilim groups. You know, I mean, what that is saying is Satan lost his power to just blanketly deceive a people group. And I think that happened at the cross. Why? Because all died. You get it that all the people groups died in Jesus. Now, with that, something has changed. Certainly different from the days of the ancients and Noah. The something is that we all died. And so as far as our thoughts, they're not, I don't believe, taken over completely. It's getting pretty close to it, though. When you look around, I mean, that people, I think if we were to really say, who are people whose thoughts are continually over on evil, and there are people like that, but we give them, for the most part, when they're discovered, a diagnosis. We call them mentally ill. We call them a psychopath, a sociopath, the antisocial personality disorder, to really water it down a lot. It's not that those people are not out there, but they're not. It's not like it's all in mass. It's all the people groups. There are, as far as we know, it's like, as far as people groups, there are usually, despite Satan's best efforts, Christians in almost all people groups. And by people groups, I don't mean, okay, there's this little tribe. I mean the big group. There are Christians in there somewhere. So God has gone through and he's beginning to take from all of people groups. Now, let's get back to what we see in these things and the way that it would have looked.